So there are six, really five, uh, ways of believing in the divine, and the sixth one is sort of an argument against method of belief, right? Rather than a way that you can or cannot do or do not believe in the divine. And I use again the term the divine as a reference to the idea of a uh, metaphysical order to the world beyond the physical one, right? So that can be Judeo-Christian, world order with the creator God at the center. It can be Taoist and Hindu or Hindu, where at the center of all of world's structure is more of a uh, cosmic force, right? Similar to the laws of nature, to the laws of physics. Or it can be uh, Buddhism, which functionally says that cause and effect is at the center of everything. Everything is empty except for that cause and effect relationship that brings forth the illusion of the fullness of existence. But either way, there are five ways, different kinds of belief, and then a sixth way, which is more an argument against the necessity for a certain type of evidence, right? For that belief. All right, so the six modes of belief are most familiar to us, to most people in the Western world, right? Because of the widespreadness of Christianity, is theism, the idea that God in particular exists, and he is involved and cares about his creation, i.e., the universe and us. Right? This is the Christian worldview. It's the Judaic worldview. It's the Islamic worldview. Right? For the most part, barring some small sects which are in fact deist. Right? And deism says that God exists, but he doesn't care for us. Uh, there's a meme that you occasionally see on the internet saying our universe is probably a third grade science, some super intelligent beings third grade assignment or assignment for the third grade science fair, and it didn't even place, right? That's functionally the view of deism, that where our universe was created and left alone to just gather dust on a shelf in the garage. God did create us, but he doesn't care about us. Rather like my marble machine from the 8th grade science Olympiad, from my 8th grade science Olympiad. I didn't really care for that project at all. Uh, Definitely not by comparison to the 7th grade science Olympiads Build a Catapult, which my best friend and I built together and are still occasionally make modifications to. Um, that was a fun one. And anyway, digression aside, the third form is atheism. Now, you might say that atheism isn't a belief in the divine; it's absence of belief in the divine, and that's not true. It's absence of belief in a personal God, right? Think of the two definitions we've already given for theism and deism, right? Theism and deism state that God exists, not that the divine exists, in a more general sense, but particularly God, right? It's like the difference between theism and polytheism, right? Polytheism is the idea that many gods exist, right? And that's one view of Hinduism, right? not one shared by all Hindus, but one that's very prominent amongst them, that there are many gods. But ultimately, atheism is just saying that there is no personal being God at the core of reality. Right? And this is a view shared by many Hindu scholars. Right? The average Hindu might be an actual polytheist. But gurus and whatnot tend to be atheists in contrast. Right? There is no creator being at the center of the universe. Instead, what's there might be a cosmic force. The Taoist worldview is atheistic in an important sense. Then there is agnosticism. And agnosticism is suspension of judgment regarding belief in the divine. Right? You don't know whether or not there is a supernatural or like a metaphysical order to everything that goes beyond the physical. Or more broadly, the agnostic claim can be we cannot know such a thing. Right? So there's a sense in which the agnostic, in a very real sense, it could be argued that the agnostics aren't really agnostic, right? They've already determined that they're atheistic, either in the more strict scientific sense that there is no God, there is no such structure, or at the very least that maybe that there is no creator God, right? But not necessarily that there's not a divine, right? Or they are believers, they're just uncertain about exactly what they believe, right? Agnosticism, it's not to say true agnosticism isn't possible, but there is a view of it that says that it's just someone who hasn't realized that they do or they don't believe. Right? Someone with a lack of self-awareness. That's not to say that that is the case, but it is one view. The final form of belief in the divine of these five sort of classifications of belief is pantheism. And pantheism is more in tune with what Taoism actually is, right? Rather than saying it's an atheist philosophy, although it is that. And Taoism says that the divine is one and the same with the universe, right? Everything is the Tao. All is the Tao is all, right? Atman is Brahman, right? All of the individual parts, as well as the whole of existence, are by their own nature a part of that greater metaphysical structure, right? Now, pantheistic and the agnosticism that leans more towards the we can't know, so why pretend to know? Why pretend to? Why believe one way or the other? Right. Both make appeals in an important regard to what is called mysticism. Right. And mysticism is just the stance, right? The position that the nature of the universe or of the divine cannot be put into words or reason, right? It's intuitive, it's felt, it's instinctual, however you want to put it. It's not something that we can vocalize, right? In trying to vocalize it, we're trying to reason through it, we're trying to solidify it, but it's more fluid and malleable than that. It is, in its very nature, ineffable, right? It's an experience, knowledge and experience of the divine is indescribable and incommunicatable. Right? It is by its nature, an individual experience, one that can be shared by everyone, but it's just the universality that it can be, that everyone can participate in by themselves and experiencing the divine, that makes it mystical. Right? The moment you try to share a religious or mystical experience with someone, it's no longer mystical. Right? You've been thrown out of the mindset and the feeling that defines it. So mysticism just says you can't logic your way to religious belief or understanding. Right? Now, this idea of mysticism stands uh, against a tradition that we see, especially within um, the Judeo-Christian tradition of what's known as rationalism, right? Um, where faith is something that's reasonable and rational, or the nature of God is something that we can reason to. We can, by reason, come to faith and understand it, right? Um, that's the tradition of rationalism. And that has an important role to play in our further discussion on um, models of belief, of religious belief.